Woo-wee, the max number of minutes I can record on this app that I bought is 15 minutes. We passed that, so this is the second part of the May 8th read aloud of chapter 5 of Animal Farm. So we're gonna pick up right here at Bravery is Not Enough. Bravery is not enough, said Squealer. Loyalty and obedience are more important. And as for the Battle of the Cowshed, I believe the time will come when we shall find that Snowball's part in it was much exaggerated. Discipline, comrades, iron discipline. That is the watchword for today. One false step, and our enemies could be upon us. Surely, comrades, you do not want Jones back. Once again, this argument was unanswerable. Certainly, the animals did not want Jones back. If the holding of debates on Sunday mornings was liable to bring him back, then the debates must stop. Boxer, who had now had time to think things over, voiced the general feeling by saying, "If Comrade Napoleon says it, it must be right." And from then on, he adopted the maxim, "Napoleon is always right," in addition to his private motto of "I will work harder." By this time, the weather had broken and the spring plowing had begun. The shed where Snowball had drawn his plans for the windmill had been shut up, and it was assumed that the plans had been rubbed off the floor. Every Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, the animals assembled in the big barn to receive their orders for the week. The skull of Old Major, now clean of flesh, had been disinterred from the orchard and set up on a stump at the foot of the flagstaff beside the gun. After the hoisting of the flag, the animals were required to file past the skull in a reverent manner before entering the barn. Nowadays, they did not sit all together as they had done in the past. Napoleon, with Squealer and the other pig named Minimus, who had a remarkable gift for composing songs and poems, sat at the front of the raised platform, with the 9 young dogs forming a semicircle around them, and the other pigs sitting behind. The rest of the animals sat facing them, in the main body of the barn. Napoleon read out the orders for the week in a gruff, soldierly style, and after a single singing of Beasts of England, all the animals dispersed. On the third Sunday after Snowball's expulsion, the animals were somewhat surprised to hear Napoleon announce that the windmill was to be built after all. He did not give any reason for having changed his mind, but merely warned the animals that this extra task would mean very hard work. It might even be necessary to reduce their rations. The plans, however, had all been prepared down to the last detail. A special committee of pigs had been at work upon them for the past 3 weeks. The building of the windmill with various other improvements was expected to take 2 years. That evening, Squealer explained privately to the other animals that Napoleon had never in reality been opposed to the windmill. On the contrary, it was he who advocated it in the beginning, and the plan which Snowball had drawn on the floor in the incubator had actually been stolen from among Napoleon's papers. The windmill was in fact Napoleon's own creation. Why, then everyone asked, had he spoken so strongly against it? Here Squealer looked very sly. That he said was Comrade Napoleon's cunning. He had seemed to oppose the windmill, simply as a maneuver to get rid of Snowball, who was a dangerous character and a bad influence. Now that Snowball was out of the way, the plan could go forward without his interference. This, said Squealer, was something called tactics. He repeated it a number of times. Tactics, comrades, tactics, skipping round and whisking his tail with a merry laugh. The animals were not certain what the word meant, but Squealer spoke so persuasively that the dogs who happened to be with him growled so threateningly that they accepted his explanation without further questions. So I love this chapter. You see very rapidly the animal farm is descending into something similar to a totalitarian government. Um, Napoleon's going to make the decisions. There's no other options. And here we see the animals, being threatened by the dogs to follow his lead. A quick little Easter egg. It said somewhere up here that they took Old Major's skull and they put it on display for the animals to go look at. If you remember in class, we talked about how Vladimir Lenin, the real life version of Old Major, his body is to this day still preserved, and you can go look at his body. So this is kind of a hint to that there's such this reverence put on the kind of fathers of these governments that their bodies are literally put out for people to look at. Um, Also, Squealer is very good at convincing these animals, which the story makes repeatedly aware that these animals like aren't very smart. I don't know. I just really like this chapter. I think when I read it in high school, this was kind of the turning point in the book for me, where it became more interesting because I was like, oh, like these animals are like, one, they're funny, and two, they are evil. So there's four questions to respond to this. What did Molly do in this chapter? Compare Snowball and Napoleon's techniques for getting support. What happens to Snowball at the end of the chapter? How is Squealer used as a propaganda tool at the end of the chapter? This is like the big main one. This whole packet, if you've noticed, the through line we've been talking about propaganda, propaganda, propaganda. How it affects us now, and how it affects characters in books, and how it affected people in the past. So the last question you'll be answering for this assignment is, how is Squealer a propaganda tool for the chapter? Don't forget to keep doing your reading. If you want to count like reading more Animal Farm in here, like I'm fine with that. People have been putting in links to like news articles they've been reading. I'm also cool with that. Graphic novels, I'm also cool with that. Just be reading. There's nothing that you can do to help your brain more than just to continue to read.